When our best fur friends leave our world, many of us are left wanting one last scritch, one last hug, one last walk together. One Last Network is a space for pet guardians to honor their pets in their senior years and to cope with the days leading up to and after their passing. Here's your host, Angela Schneider, founder of One Last Network and Big White Dog Photography in Spokane, Washington.
Welcome to One Last Network, and today's episode, The Art of Summer Lovin. Chris Miller is the eye behind the camera at Mill Pet Photography in Windsor and Ascot, United Kingdom. After a 40-year career in tech, he heard the call of the shutter release button, his dad having been a semi-professional photographer too. But he also heard the howl of the dog and settled on a second career in dog photography. With his wife Sue on his team, Chris created Mill Pet Photography with a goal to take pet guardians on magical adventures throughout their borough, which is about 30 miles outside London. Things took a turn last fall, though, when Chris and Sue experienced the loss of their precious kitty, Summer. The heartache at their cat's sudden passing continues to weigh heavily. But when Chris heard me interviewed on a podcast for photographers about One Last Network and the training I give to help professional pet photographers better support their clients in grief, a new path became clear. He registered almost immediately, took the grief training, and scored a perfect 18 on the certification quiz. He now seeks to be a conduit for his clients to find the support and services they may need but not be aware of within his community. He strives to connect people, and what a wonderful goal that is. But let's not keep listening to me tell you about it. Have a listen to Chris tell his own story as a guest on this week's episode. Good morning, Chris Miller. What time is it in your part of the world?
Oh, it's 4:20 in the afternoon.
Okay, I cannot do time zones. It's 8 o'clock in the morning for me in Pacific, and so that would put you exactly where?
We are in the UK. We're just south of Windsor. Most people would know Windsor Castle. Either they've seen it, been there, or flown over it on their way into London. And we're just south in a town called Ascot, pretty famous for its Royal Ascot races every June.
So tell us a little about Chris Miller, Sue Miller, and Miller Images.
Yeah, sure. Well, the short and abridged version is 40 years of experience in the tech industry. And anyone that's approached anything like that will know that's possibly just a bit too long and you're kind of like getting tired and expired. But it was a number of fairly senior level roles and nearly always for American companies. So always challenging, but great fun and a great network of people and friends. And I'm still happy to call them friends from across that industry. But the last couple of years, as we went into COVID, I was getting extremely frustrated with the whole working from home experience and finding it really difficult to try and motivate and drive a large team that way, because some of the roles were quite large in the number of people. And at the same time, throughout my life, I started right back when my dad, who's still with us, which is fantastic, and my biggest fan of the dog photography work, but my dad was a part-time wedding photographer doing black and whites. And I remember the smell of the darkroom and occasionally going up there with my Zenit EM camera and the films that I'd taken and exposed. And then just to watch the magic appear in that smelly darkroom, I can still remember, almost imagine it now.
You never forget the smell of Fixer, do you?
You can't, no. The only thing my dad made me do was go buy my own so I didn't waste his and his paper. Once I was earning enough. So it's always been there, but it's always been a hobby and nothing more. And then in 2018, when I was starting to think about, well, what's life beyond corporate tech? What is life in retirement, if there is such a phrase? And I'm not someone that can stop completely. So I wanted to do something different. And I've done a lot of charitable work in industry, but I felt that I really didn't want to do anything more associated with the tech industry. And so how can I do something that's so different? And never worked with animals and children, but what if you did just that? What if you photograph animals and children? And, having been a keen photographer, mostly travel throughout, and some of the subjects I took, obviously always taking pictures of our dog, our cats, etc. But I felt that maybe I should train as something in a real specialist niche. And so the concept of Mill Pet Photography and Miller's Image Limited, Miller's Image Limited, MIL, is our surname. And I couldn't call myself Miller when I was very young. My dad said I used to call myself Mill. So that's where the Mill piece came from. And that's where we came up with Miller's Image Limited. There's nothing more to it than that. But in 2018, decided to set that up as a proper company. So we registered that firm and started to train as a dog photographer with so many amazing people that I'm glad to know today. That people like Charlotte Rees right from the beginning, Claudio Piccoli in Italy, who's really helped me on my dogs in action photography. And then some more local people as well. Maria Michael here in the UK was a massive help in just focusing on the business and knowing what to take photographs of and what not to. And that I started that off in 2018, run that as a side gig, I guess, but very professionally until we took the final plunge at the beginning of last year. So in 2022, goodbye the tech industry and hello, nothing other than dog photography.
Congratulations. I did some time in the tech industry and it was trifling boring. Oh my gosh.
I knew it was wrong for me when I went to a large external meeting with customers and partners, and I'm not embarrassed to say it was for Dell. It was a great meeting, probably 2,000-3,000 people there, and the only thing I got interested in was the dog on the screen in one of the slides. And I said that to someone I was with. I said, look, I need to get out of this business because the only thing I found interesting today is the dog that we put on the screen. So I knew then it was time.
So what is it about dog photography now that just fills your cup?
For me, and I'm going to be very blunt, it's the oxytocin level that just rises every single time. Even if I'm just editing a photograph. I've been doing quite a bit of work these last few days on trying to prepare and get a focus around creating a magical adventure for dogs coming to their last years and maybe even their last days. And as I've gone back through the archives of the last 5 years and seen some of those photographs, there's some sad stories in there, but along with the sadness, there's still the excitement of, I remember that session. I remember what we did. And I really try, like many dog photographers, to focus on getting that connection with the eyes as much as possible, the connection with the owner and the connection with the eyes if they're looking at you. And when I do that, I just feel every time my heart jumps and I feel that it's what it's all about. This is the way I do it. And I love it when whatever product, someone takes at the end, when they open that and, the first few times in 2018, when they had tears, I was thinking something was wrong. Oh, have I really messed it up? But actually realizing very quickly, no, that's actually the reaction you're going to get in many, many cases. And I just think it's wonderful. If I can help create permanent memories for people that then they can treasure, I've done my job. And I do consider it a job, but I consider it an enormous privilege to be able to do this as well.
Is there a particular fur friend who lives in your heart that drives you to do these things?
Oh, I've got goosebumps. You asked me that question. Yes. Let me go back, and I don't have it to hand, but I have one photograph, just one photograph of me with my first dog. And my dad and I, we talk. He doesn't live anywhere near me, but we talk every week, and we talk about this quite often, which is that between us, we still only have that one photograph. And how can someone who was a hobbyist photographer, that's all I was, a dad who was a semi-professional photographer doing weddings, how can we only have one photograph of of our first dog. And it was a rescue greyhound. And she lived till 11 years, 11 months and 12 days, which shows you how important she was to me, because she was almost to the day a year younger than me as well. So I was extremely young when she came into the household, but we grew up together. And that photograph is completely priceless to me. I mean, it really is. And so every time I think of things and think of situations, it's like no one can ever be in that position again. And fortunately, because of particularly phones, no one will be in that position again. But there's something special about the picture, not just the fact it's the only one, it's the fact that I'm in that photograph. And I'm very rarely in photographs. I've just changed, in fact, because of you, Angela, I've just changed my social media profile picture to be in it. And I rarely am, but it's me with in fact, the incredible Cretu at Crofts this year. And yeah, it's rare. And I think with a lot of dog owners, it's rare for them as well to be in the photographs. They get plenty of pictures of themselves, but never enough of that connection together. And this black and white, I will send it to you so you see it as well. It's so important to me, and I want to make sure that everyone has that opportunity. So that's way back then. But then on the journey, there's been a number of fur babies, fur friends. But the biggest loss for us was very recently, just back in September, where we lost Summer. And Summer was a cat, or is still a cat, across the Rainbow Bridge. But Summer was rescued here in the UK. There's a very large rescue organisation called Battersea, or Battersea Cats and Dogs. And they have 3 locations, one fairly close to us, actually, in Windsor. And when our last cat, in fact, had passed away at 18 years old, very, very good and long life, we were without for just a short period of time. And my wife was taking care of her mother, who was quite poorly. So she was away. And we just saw this wonderful black and white tuxedo cat on their website. And we're messaging each other. And then the next thing is, about a week and a half later, Summer comes into our house. And she was estimated to be about a year and a half. And for 5 and a bit years with us, she was just absolutely amazing and wonderful to come home to. And as a photographer, a fantastic model as well to be able to take pictures of. I don't do studio, I only do on location. So it's quite interesting to get on location cat photographs, but I have a few. And very, very pleased and proud of those. And that's the wonderful thing we have. But last summer, of all things, as literally we were coming to the end of summer, it was the end of her as well. We had no idea. We were away on holiday, and we had our daughter popping in now and again, but our neighbour taking really good care. And our neighbour started to get quite concerned that the food was just not disappearing fast enough, which, as we all know, as dog lovers, pet lovers, it could simply be they're just pining for you, that, you just disrupted their routine. It doesn't necessarily mean it's anything serious. And then we made sure that she was given some treats. A special treat was tuna. And she ate that without issue, apparently. So when we got home, same thing. She would eat that, but nothing else. And we literally just tried for 24 hours to see was there something we could do, and then went to the vet. And unfortunately, after 2, we managed to bring her home for 1 day and go back the next day as well. Still no progress, which is very, very poorly at this stage. And then with a series of scans, etc., she's had it for a while, it seemed, but it was a 7-centimeter tumor, which was actually causing a blockage as well. And yes, in a lot of pain. And that really, really hard decision is like, okay, what can we do? And we were advised, it's the same place we've gone with all of our pets in the past. And we were advised that you can take her home and you can do this, but she's not going to recover from this. This really is, she's too small. This is too big. But we'll support you for whatever you feel you need to do. And then when I asked the questions, look, if we take her home and if we do all of the following things, are we prolonging life for our benefit, or are we helping her? And that was the hardest piece, is when the vet, who we totally trust, turned around and said, I have to be honest, you're doing it for yourselves, definitely not for her in this case. And that was the hardest decision for us to go, you know what, we can't do it just for our benefit. This isn't right. And she had been screaming in pain that morning before we took her to the vet as well. And my wife said, this is definitely not right. So Sue was really concerned by it. And yeah, that was the 13th of September last year. So it was very tough, and very sudden and unexpected. And she was 7 years old, which is clearly no age for a cat at all. So very tough for us at that time, Angela. And right now we're furless, and that we will not stay furless. We know that. We're just trying to work out, what do we do next? Do we say, this is the opportunity to go back to having dogs, and maybe dogs and cats? Because sorry, I didn't say, when we rescued Summer, it was on the condition that there was no dog or any other animals, because she was already in foster home. She couldn't stay at the cattery. She couldn't be near dogs. So she was very special, but we took care of her and made sure that she fitted in very well. But we knew it had to be a solo cat, shall we say. And now we're trying to work out, what do we do next?
What was life without Summer like in the beginning?
Oh, horrible. That anticipation of coming in, and she's not there. The bits and pieces, summer towers, as we called it, which was just a series of areas that she used to sit on, and just a cat house, really. In the garden, I'd made a cat shelter, so that if it was raining, and she could get in and out the flat, but she liked to be outside. So it was a little cat shelter I'd made, and I had to move that from the vision directly out into the garden, just because it reminded me, and we're not going to see her stick her head out of that again. So it's still in the garden, it's okay. But just a few things I wanted to take away from immediate eyesight. But we didn't take any of her photographs down. They're everywhere. They still are today, because we wanted her around us. But at the same time, we didn't want a constant kind of negative reminder. And I found that things that she had lived in and was living in, I found those really difficult to look at. But having said that, I know this isn't a video, so there's not a lot of point me going into the cupboard right behind me, but in that cupboard behind me is a small toy mouse that she played with every single day. And I still have that in that cupboard, because for me, I just wanted to keep something that was important, and a collar and a tag and things like that. Yeah, we have those as well, but I have that mouse, and I want to, and I will keep that mouse. It is a toy one, don't worry.
How are you keeping her memory alive for you?
This is helping, actually, just talking about it now as well. But when we go out of the front door of the house, again, being a professional photographer, it's much easier to have these things, but we have an HD acrylic photograph of her in a round orb, and it's right by the door. So when we come in, hi Summer. When we go out, hi Summer. It's just we used to say that to the real thing, and it's just a way of being able to do that. And it being acrylic, occasionally I'll even just tap her paw on it, because it's just feels a nice way of acknowledging her regularly. But she's right by our front door, so we see her as we go out and when we come in, which was very similar to when she was with us as well. And
did you get photos done with her?
No. And that's it's like me and her. No, there's a couple with Sue, but no. And if there's anyone listening to this that thinks 7 years old is nothing, and it's not, and it's still nothing for most dogs as well, but you don't expect it. And if you think, hey, I've got plenty of time, from 7 to whatever that might be, we don't know the number, but we'd have plenty of time. But there are no photographs, I think, at all of me and Summer, simply because we didn't we just took pictures of her. She was 7. She was quite small as well, but she was just a big kitten, really. But there are some pictures with my wife, with Sue, which are great, but they're not. None of those are on the wall because they were never taken. I'll call them professionally. Even if I took them, they literally were just with a quick iPhone snap. They were never taken with what I use to take clients' photographs, which is such a shame and a missed opportunity. But we should never leave it because it could be too late.
In speaking about that human-animal connection, where do you see the images that a professional photographer can take differs from just anybody or a selfie or?
It's a really good question, Angela. And it's something that I think I can be quite concise on. But now I feel bad because I'm thinking, why didn't I do that then with Summer? And that's the one thing that I see before I even got involved with One Last Network. The one thing I always saw was the connection between a dog guardian and their dog. I could always see that. And the same would be true of cats. I just don't photograph cats professionally. And we'll still choose not to be fair, although if we get cats again, I am going to make sure there's pictures of me with them. That's for sure. For the people who see my profile picture with Kratu, that was taken by Sue. So she can take photographs. There's no issue with her taking photographs. But back to the point, I've always seen the connection, and so many clients say, oh, I don't want to be in the photographs. Let's say I'm just doing a regular meal pet photography experience. It's going to be a 60 to 90 minute experience. We're coming for a walk with them and we're going to go on an adventure together, whatever it might be. But I just want some portrait shots, and I want some of your dogs in action pictures. I love the way you get the dogs flying through the air. I want some of them catching the ball, whatever it might be. And I send out 6 teasers, normally 6. If I have enough time, 6 weeks of teasers. They'll reduce in time if the session's sooner. But to give people some ideas of the types of pictures that we take. And in those, there's a few pictures with owners, or maybe obscured pictures with owners where the face isn't there and it's just parts of the body, but they're all showing the connection. And that's the first time that maybe they start to think, maybe I could be in the picture. But so many of our clients say they don't want to be photographed. They don't want to be in it at all. And so I will still almost insist right at the end, let's just get a picture of taking paw. Let's just get a picture of the dog between your legs. I'll stand over you and I'll look down. And then they'll see their trousers, they'll see their shoes, and they'll see their dog looking up at them. And those types of photographs, they'll always include in the albums. We often do albums. They'll always include those in the albums. And even though they didn't want to be in any photograph at all. So I'm looking for that connection. And I think that's the one thing that, as a professional photographer, and more so now I've completed my certification with One Last Network, it's helped me really make sure that I get that connection and get that trust and that love together, and capturing it in such a way that I think is something that we can do as professional dog photographers, but also we have that empathy around just how important those connections are for us personally, and that we can then portray those for our clients.
What drew you to One Last Network to begin with?
Great question. And I was on holiday when I heard this. We're in Thailand. I remember it so well, though. I'm like many people, I'm a subscriber to Andrew Helmich and PhotoVizX, and I listen to them every single week, normally when I'm working out, but I listened to that one, and I just remember it so well. I was enjoying the sun in Thailand, having a nice break, and Andrew's asking you questions as you're a guest on there, and I listened and I listened and I listened, and I just thought, this makes so much sense. I've done and I do occasional, what I had called till that point, rainbow bridge sessions, occasionally memory sessions, but normally rainbow bridge because it was a last minute call. And I thought everything that you were answering in questions from Andrew and that whole session made me realize there's much more to it than just being available at last minute to take some compassionate photographs.
Yeah.
And last year I took a photograph. Sorry, I had a session booked for a client as part of the Tales of the Windsor and Ascot book we were doing. And unfortunately, that client and that dog never got to be in the book. Not quite true, because I gave the last page to that client and we took 6 images from the client's phone and I did put them in the book as in memory.
Oh, kind of you.
But yes, thank you. But none of those were taken by me. I did re-edit them, but none of them were taken by me. And I didn't know how to help that lady at the time when she said, what do I do? This was after the dog had passed. And she said, what do I do? I've been a week. The hole in my heart is so big. I don't know what to do. And she's phoning me. And I'm trying to give her some words of encouragement. I'm trying to use a few poems and things that I've seen. And I felt helpless. I felt like I couldn't really give her connections to anyone. And when I heard your interview, I thought of this lady and I kind of connected the two things together to go, I wouldn't be in that position again. I'm going to have to get off my bum, go out and build a network locally in the UK that's similar to many of the things that you guys have done in the whole of One Last Network, and create a community of people that can help and that I can connect. I don't have to be the counselor. I just have to be a grief specialist that can connect people. And that's what I'm now proud to say I can do. So that was the reason I heard that podcast. And where are we? 4 months later, nearly, maybe. I'm in that position.
It always humbles me to think that we are often in our clients' lives for a very brief period of time, but a very profound and impactful period of time, because they are experiencing such complex emotions, not just with the impending loss of their dog, but with the future without their dog, pet. It can be a horse or a cat or what have you. And it just resonates with me, the importance of what we do in creating those images for them to have and to hold as comfort and healing in the future. Is that something that you see yourself being able to do for your clients as well?
Yes, it is, Angela. And I think I've done that very specifically with one client without necessarily appreciating that was what I was creating for them. And I'm using, with their permission, I'm using that client now. So the dog is an old English time bulldog called Hugo. And the call I got was, Hugo has this tumor the size of a tennis ball. We're going to drain it one last time, but it keeps coming back. There's nothing they're going to be able to do, so they won't try to drain again. So we need to do this. We need to do this quickly. How quickly can we do this? And I just said, as soon as you wish, I'll fit this in. And bearing in mind, I was actually still in permanent employment at the time. This was a very early in the morning session that we did, but we did it. And at the same time, I kind of realized that this poor dog had been shaved quite significantly on one side, obviously for the treatment he had to have. And so I asked the guardian, would you like me to not leave it that way? This has just been the last few weeks. You've seen him like this. Would you like it to be as close as it could be naturally? I said, I can leave it if you wish. And he was like, if you think you could repair it. And of course, as dog photographers, we all know how to do that. So I did a series of obviously cloned patches to improve that, and created, as the owner says, You recreated his youth. He was only 7 years as well. His 7 number is a bit sticking today, but he was 7 years as well. But as he said, you managed to recapture his youth in those photographs, just by using some techniques such as a slightly slower shutter speed to make it look a little bit blurry on the legs, etc. It made him look like he was racing, and he clearly wasn't. And then we did some colours and some editing to make it look more autumnal than the winter it actually was. But what we created at the end, unfortunately, he wasn't able to take his artwork before Hugo passed. But when he eventually could take the artwork, and that was the key thing, is you don't rush these things. No. When he could take the artwork, he now looks at those with so much joy over the life and happiness that Hugo brought them over the 7 years they had him. And so I feel that, yes, we're creating memories that can be truly treasured, but also it's bringing back and reliving some of the life that they had with Hugo. And I have to admit, even to this day, he's put a wonderful comment out on our Google reviews as well, which is just, it's just lovely to have. But that's secondary to knowing what they actually have are true memories that they treasure.
How do you carry your own grief for summer into your sessions now?
I think that's a very tough question to answer. Because what I'm always trying to capture is happiness, love, and the kind of connection with any client, any dog that I see in front of me. I have one next week to do, which is an extremely disabled dog, not aged, but extremely disabled and rescued as well, which is fantastic. But going into that, I know it's going to be quite emotional. I've already been set up for it by someone to help me understand. It's going to be quite emotional. And I think for me, the loss of summer being quite recent it does make it, even though I'm a guy, it does make it a lot more difficult to not be emotional and to not be connected. I think the problem is I'm not a photographer. I'm a dog photographer that really cares and has a deep passion. Otherwise I just wouldn't do it. I'd probably do some non-executive board director positions that I was asked to do, but I want to just stop that industry and move and follow a passion. And I think for me, the passion is absolutely just getting that unconditional love and trust between the owner and the dogs, which hopefully I can do as much as in puppies and very active dogs, but also creating some lasting memories for aged and ill ones as well. But I can't just do puppies forever. I need to be able to, as much as they're great fun, I want to be able to do the whole range. And I particularly want to make sure that people do have lasting memories. So I think losing summer, it's created a much deeper emotional trigger there that can come out at any stage. I have to admit, just last week, was it this week? We were watching Paul O'Grady passed away here in the UK not that long ago. And Paul O'Grady was an entertainer for obviously people listening on a global basis. But he was also the ambassador for Battersea Cats and Dogs Home, which is where our summer came from. And we were watching a tribute show to him, and we were doing really well, both of us, doing really, really well. And we were thinking, great work he'd done. And then the last 5 minutes were other celebrities talking about, how no one can replace Paul and what he did. And I just don't realize half the time that trigger is there. Something can just turn it on, and the old man will cry if that happens. And I kind of hope I won't cry with a client when I'm photographing the dogs, but I actually know it doesn't matter if I do, and I can share that with them. I think where it's going to be worse is if I do and they don't. But
That
Hopefully I'll be able to control that.
one of the more important things I learned in my own grief training was that we live in a grief illiterate society. And when you hear that and start to understand what that means, you start to think, oh, yeah, we really do. We're not taught how to manage grief or encounter grief and move forward from grief as we are, we get the birds and the bees chat and those kinds, but we don't get those life lessons. So now, having done some training on grief, has it changed the way you approach your own grief?
Yes, it has. One of the topics of discussion, Sue's not done the training with me, but she's obviously had to listen to it in the evening when I've kind of come back and said, "Oh, yeah, listen what I've heard today." And we talked about, particularly, going back, I guess, a couple of generations in how when in human grief and someone passed away, that would happen at home, and the doors would be wide enough at the front door to take the coffin in and out, etc. And we just hadn't even considered that and had that whole conversation. And then as we started to think a bit about our grandparents and our great grandparents and some early memories, actually going back a long way, we probably could deal with grief better than we've been able to more recently. So yes, it's definitely opened our eyes up to that. And the one thing that I've done in these last 2 weeks, quite specifically, has been trying to find that network of other people that, not if, but when I get that phone call again from someone that says, "What do I do? I didn't get an opportunity." And it's not about, "I'm sorry, I couldn't take your photographs." That's just part of a treasured memory. But it's about, talking with other people who are pet bereavement counselors, whether it's actually, it has happened, but how are you going to handle, are you just going to talk to the vet around whether it's a cremation or do you want a personal service? Here in the UK, not far from where we live, is a company that will actually not just do the personal cremation, but will actually run a whole service that you can attend as well. And I've used them, by the way, for summer, but we didn't realize, because the vet didn't tell us, that we could have gone and actually been part of the service. So it's reaching out to these different people and even finding some amazing pet tributes locally that we didn't know existed. I was at Crufts, the biggest dog show, and while I was there, I've connected with someone who's not far from where we live, who builds pet frame urns, but they do them as a frame. So on the front, you have one of our photographs, hopefully, but on the back, in a obviously a secure compartment, you can have the ashes. You can also have the dog collar, and maybe even the little toy mouse. You could have that also as part of the frame. And these are just amazing tributes. Again, I hadn't been looking or searching for these things, but in now building this network, I feel I can better serve the community of people that I work with. And I couldn't have done that without kind of One Last Network and the grief training that goes with it, because me keeping a toy mouse in the cupboard is no different to others keeping the collar that they're never going to put on another pet, but they've got it and they're trying to remember it. But if it's in a drawer or somewhere, maybe it could go with a photograph, nicely presented in a frame. Doesn't have to have the ashes with it necessarily, but if the ashes are somewhere, you want to combine all of those things, then what a lasting tribute that can be.
Yeah. It's been life-changing for me to go through the grief training that I've taken, and it's changed the way that I walk in the world. How about you?
Yeah, it definitely opens your eyes up a lot more. I haven't had to suffer and go through personal grief over a family member for some time. Mother-in-law was the last one. a few years back. So for me, I feel I'd be in a better position to manage, I'm not going to say cope, but manage the situation and manage people around me as well. Because I think, it's a bit like mental health. Say it's okay to not be okay. It's good to talk. Well, actually, it is good to discuss grief, and I think if you can do that with someone that has been trained or is a counsellor even, it's going to help you on your journey, because I feel that you sometimes feel a bit odd or maybe even embarrassed. What do you mean you cried for a couple of days over a cat? You can't have that conversation with people at the golf club or I go and play golf with or whatever necessarily. You feel you should be able to, but actually now I'm in a position where I can have a slightly different variation of that conversation that would be okay to have and not be embarrassed and probably not cry over it. But yeah, I think it's made me much more aware of what can be going on in people's lives as well. But I just felt really helpless. It's like about 30 odd years ago when I had a phone call from my gran who'd fallen and cut herself and was trying to work out what to do, just on the phone, not close to where I live. And I took a first aid course after that because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to, basically it was like, call emergency services. They'll take care of you, which is what we did. But she called first. I'm like, actually, I could have said, apply pressure to the wound. We'll call emergency services, but let's apply pressure to the wound. I didn't even give her that. So my reaction was, I need to know better, go do a first aid course. When I had the phone call last year from the lady, hadn't worked out what I was going to do, hearing you being interviewed, no, I knew what I was going to do. And I think it's made me a person now that can help connect others. And that's it. I just feel I could probably make a difference. And I kind of look forward to doing that.
That's very exciting for you, I think. What else do you want to share about Chris Miller and Mill Photography?
Yeah, just one thing is that we're discussing this with Sue at length about how do we change a section on our website that says it's Rainbow Bridge, we're going to change what we're going to do. And for us, and I'm not saying it's just for the UK market per se, but when you hear the phrase end of life, when you even hear Rainbow Bridge, they're very final. They're very like it's an end. And I think one of the things I've picked up, particularly with the wording that you've used in the training, Angela, is that it's all about adventures, and particularly for you and your focus, it is about having life adventures with Bella and Shep. But for me, what I want to do is I want to try and create at least one last adventure for people. And so one of the things that we always talk about with our core business is we talk about creating a magical experience. That's what we do. We're going to come on a walk with you, but it's going to be a magical experience. You're going to, at the end of the day, talk about what a great day you had. When you see the photographs, you're going to remind you of the great day you had. So we wanted to continue that, but even if it was one last adventure. So we talked about making it one last magical adventure. And I'm prepared to do whatever's needed for that. If we're just going to the park, we're just going to go in the garden, we're just going to come to your house. If it's simple as that, that's fine. But if someone says, no, we've got some time, we want to hike to the top of this hill, this mountain. Here in the UK, the smaller ones of them would probably be Snowdon. We want to go to the top of Snowdon and we want to get photographs up there. I'll do that. I want to create that one last adventure, that one last magical adventure, and make it magical. So for us, we're in the process of just taking a couple of changes. We're doing some tweaks to our website that will talk about one last magical adventure, but we're building a whole website and a whole focus around one last network, one last magical adventure. And what I want to do is, as I start to blog and promote more this work that we're doing and one last network, we're going to draw all the focus to creating one last magical adventure together.
Oh.
And that together is with the client so that we can do that. And that way as well, if someone hits our website and they've got puppies or they want dogs in action shots, they don't start to think that Chris is only now photographing, sort of one magical adventure sessions towards end of life. We're not going to be doing that exclusively. So we're going to create almost a separate focus, not a brand, but a separate focus, and calling it One Last Magical Adventure with One Last Network. So cool. that's where we're going. I think that's the one thing we feel is important, so that I can really draw attention to that in the most appropriate way, and still go take care of puppies and dogs that want to do crazy things like flying in the air and agility.
Well, that's fun, and we need that to keep our hearts light and our spirits soaring, because puppies are fun, and jumping into the lake is fun, and watching dogs jump over logs is just fun, and we need those sessions. We do.
Yeah. And what I want to do as much as possible is still try and retain fun in these one last magical adventures together, but they need to be with the compassion and respect of what's appropriate for what the dog's able to do at that time.
I think you're on a great track with that. That's wonderful. What is one last piece of advice you would give to listeners, particularly in your area, about getting photos done with their dogs on a magical adventure with Mill Photography?
Well, I think there's two parts to this. One is, don't leave it too late. I have the one picture, black and white, from Jenny, was the name of our greyhound. And I don't have any photographs of me with Summer as a cat. So don't leave it too late, whatever. And whilst we're calling it One Last Magical Adventure, that's for those people that kind of realize that their dog is not doing the walks that it used to, that things are slowing down. Well, let's not talk about the last walk. It's not a rainbow bridge session. That's what we're trying to not get to. Let's create a magical adventure together. So yes, it might not involve frisbees and things, but it may still involve favorite toys. It may still involve going to some of the great places. You might just drive further than walk and hike as much. But let's create some of those and do those sooner rather than later. So yeah, for me, I would just say, don't leave it too late. I have regrets that I can't change. But yeah, don't leave it too late.
Thank you so much for joining us, Chris.
Thank you, Angela, for the opportunity and the great work you're doing with the One Last Network as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris's story strikes into the heart of what we do as professional pet photographers. Even knowing he had only one photo of his childhood bestie, Jenny, he doesn't have any of his time with Summer, a cat who became very special in a short amount of time. Despite having already launched his pet photography business and having created special memories for dog lovers in his region. Summer lived to only 7 years old, and she gives us a stark reminder that while cats may live into their late teens, we have no guarantee of tomorrow. Our pets teach us to love greatly and live more in the moment, and the lesson is to seize that moment to have those photos done now. Whether now is bouncy puppy stage, peak adventure season, or the phase where the gray whiskers have taken over. Because they have loved us so deeply, they deserve a legacy, a tribute to their lives. And those photos, a core belief for all of the photographers at One Last Network, can stir happy memories of your love and eventually bring comfort and healing from the pain of having lost them. Next week, we're going to spend a little time talking about the anger that often shows up when we're grieving over the loss of our pets. If you have a story to share about it, please feel free to comment or send us a DM on Instagram or Facebook. We'd love to hear how you've encountered anger and how you manage that so very intense emotion. Until then, I'm Angela Schneider, owner of Big White Dog Photography in Spokane, Washington, and your host at One Last Network. signing off to go get some Bella snuggles. Listen to One Last Network on whichever podcast platform you prefer. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. Don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you have a friend who might be interested in our content, make sure you share us with them. Thanks for listening.